Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to talk about presentations. what have we been doing? What could we be doing? And what should not be doing? So we'll be talking about all of those things in the second hour. If you've got questions about presentations, go ahead and throw those in. Otherwise, we'll just kind of mosey on along. Anyway, we're going to get started with the questions here. Go ahead and throw those questions in. General discussion for the first hour. This is a great opportunity. We've got a great panel here to answer your questions. So throw those questions in early and throw them in often. All right, let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Ronnie, go ahead. Take it away.
Douglas Carmichael starts us out with, the Cisco Catalyst 9200 switches put out 45 dB of maximum noise in operation. Considering that Cisco's fanless equivalent, the Catalyst 9200CX, is not available yet, what compact, manageable gigabit switch would you recommend for a studio control room?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I'll let our other switcher mavens recommend a compact switch, but in all my situations when running sound control rooms, we always put, we had a machine room, a separate closet where we had all the noisy things with the fans like switches. Or you could get something like this, which is a soundproof server rack. It's a bit pricey, about $1,500, but it's soundproof and cooled with baffling so that you could put your servers in there. And then you wouldn't have to... You could put that Catalyst 9200 in there without fear of it contaminating your soundtracks.
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, the operative word was compact, because that implies that it's not hooking up a world's largest machine room. And I've had good luck with this guy. I don't know if you can still find them anymore, but it's the Netgear GS16. It's a 16-port gigabit switch. It's fanless, metal case, built like a tank. It's served me faithfully for the last 10 years for going out in locations where I need to bring a switch with me.
Next question.
Next question comes from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. Good day, long time no ocean. I'm not technically proficient WRT QR codes. How hard would it be to occasionally flash up a QR code for people to scan in a YouTube live stream? They are seeing in a pub, so they could watch it on their phone.
Yeah, so it's not that hard. It depends on whether you're on a Mac or PC. There is a QR creator. I think it's actually called QR Factory that I use. I do a lot of QR codes. So QR Factory on the Mac is what I use. And so anyway, yeah. So if you can type a URL in there. The main thing to think about is what happens when people can't type that URL in. So you want to be thinking about what is their other thing. So what I do is I either use a bit.ly link for this, or I create, for larger events, I create my own URL that I'm going to send them to. So it's askthis.live or whatever it is that I make up one and I pay for it. And then I have a place that's nice and short, easy to remember, and actually some good branding as well. So think about putting that URL right underneath the QR code so they also kind of know what they're getting themselves into. But otherwise, those are the things to think about when you put those QR codes together. But QR Factory works well. Do not use the web versions of QR creators. Never use a web version of a QR creator. Almost all of them are building a link through their system for a subscription. And if you stop paying for that subscription, your QR code will never work again. Do not trust anything online. You want an app that you paid for that creates the QR code. Trust me. Go ahead, Bill.
I found that they work really, really well, even in some of the strangest places. I put them on movie screens. I put them on large screen TVs in bars and things like that. And surprisingly, it appears to be a pretty robust technology in terms of the fact that most phone QR readers will parse these, even if they're not the best in the best case, like you're shooting a bar big screen from an angle. It surprises me often how well they work. So as a technology, it seems pretty robust and dependable.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Alex, your comment about not trusting web-based QR code generators, I'm wondering how many of those also incorporate things like tracking cookies or anything like that. Is that a risk as well?
Yeah, it's all a risk. It's all a bad idea. Like there's a whole bunch of them out there. They're all free, or they seem free, and they're rerouting through there, and you don't notice it. You'll put the QR code up and you'll click on it, and it'll pass through so quickly that unless you're really paying attention to it, you're not going to notice it. And so you shouldn't use them ever. Like it just really just buy one for your PC or Mac. I don't know what the PC ones are, but QR Factory is the one I use on the Mac. And they have lots of little customizations. Some of the ones online are really cool, and they do things that QR Factory doesn't do. But you don't want to, in my opinion, go down that path. Next question.
Our next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. Spotify has built their own studio complex in Los Angeles. What does this mean for studio owners? Will more content distributors move up the value chain?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think they're all trying to get into the, sideways entry into the music business itself. They have already a bunch of podcast studios there so that they can originate several of their podcasts. And of course, Los Angeles is a haven for recording artists and actors and producers and people you'd want to interview on a podcast. So it makes sense to put it in Los Angeles. And I think maybe this new studio looks like it could do high-end music recording in it as well, because they've got a collection of instruments and a pretty good setup and board and recording. So maybe they're going to get into producing as well and become a label. Who knows? The Spotify label maybe next.
Go ahead, Bill.
I do wonder if a little bit of that era has gone, because it used to be that the big studios, the 3 or 4 in Los Angeles and the ones all around the world. I was talking earlier today about Air Studios and that George Martin did in Montserrat before the volcano. These kind of destination studios were a huge thing during the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. But from the modern era, when everybody started moving all their gear home and doing things, and that big sweep of the Grammys that Billie Eilish and her brother Phineas managed working out of their bedroom, I think lit a fire in all the musicians and the folks who wanted to have a career in music, that it is no longer required. The only place you can get a good microphone is not going into Sunset Sound or something. They still have their place. And if you want the expertise that those studios had accumulated around them in terms of producers and arrangers and the rest of that, yeah, I think there's still a place. But it is not surprising to me that I haven't heard of any big studios other than studios for these huge services like Spotify, where they have so much economic power because of another business that they do this as a sideline. I'm wondering whether the era of the big bespoke studios is kind of fading away.
Good, Courtney.
One thing I forgot to mention is they may just be building the studio for live performance for their streaming service. Sirius has the same thing. They've got a big building here in LA with the live studios in it, where they can host, bands to bring them in for, instead of just trying to squeeze a band into a podcast studio and just playing tracks, they can actually bring them in and do a live performance in the studio of a fairly large rock and roll band, or even a jazz band of some sort.
Yeah, the pictures really look like a recording studio, so you can do live from those, and we've done them. We've done events. Most of the events that we've done like that are from Village Studios in LA, which is a great venue for doing. They've got a Neve, and then they've got Studio A is nice and big, and you can really do a lot in it. And then they've got the Masonic room above, and you'll see a lot of things if you do a search for Village Studios. You'll see people. I think Tears for Fears recently did a live stream, or a live cut at least, or not live, but they recorded there some of their singles. And so I think that these studios are a great opportunity for that. I do think that it's an obvious thing for Apple and Spotify and others to go ahead and just remove the record labels, except for the fact that they have to deal with the record labels to get the rest of the music. So most of their contracts are tied up in them not doing what Spotify looks like it's doing. But I don't think Spotify is looking at becoming a label or doing original. What the studio looks like when we look at the article is that they're going to re-record a song that they've already recorded, and one cover. So those are the things that they've been kind of doing in that Spotify room. So they're not creating new content. And I think that that's where they're kind of stepping really close to that line. The risk that all of the record companies have is that if anything breaks down with Spotify or Apple Music, and they decided to move into removing the record labels from the system, they could. they could come down on them really fast. But at the same time, it's kind of a mutual assured destruction, is that Apple and Spotify still need contracts for all of that content that would end up being removed. You saw what happened with Netflix. Netflix has a lot less outside content once they started creating their own content, and it was a little bit of them not buying it, but it's also a lot of them not being offered it anymore. So anyway, so I think that there's it's kind of a back and forth that's there. The studio looks good. It's not, when I say state of the art, I mean 48 tracks is cute for some of these bigger studios. So it's not as big as a lot of the studios that I've seen in LA. So it is a solid recording studio. It's not going to compete with some of the more complex ones that are there, like Village and others. So I think that it really is a good, letting the artist do stuff. One thing to notice is that there's also, I think it's 18 podcast studios that they built. So I guess they call it Pod City. So they're definitely still doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down on podcasts within Spotify. So it's interesting space. Next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. Scan, SKAN, the UK-based sound company, has now been acquired by Claire Global in Pennsylvania. Why could Claire be acquiring so many sound companies like Britannia Row and Eighth Day? Could they be hedging their bets in a digital hybrid-first future?
Go ahead, Bill.
I think this was the inevitable evolution of Claire Brothers. They've been in the audio game since, the Grateful Dead. I mean, literally since the 60s. They built and built and built, and they're at now that place. They are international, and they have the economic power to do it. And so I think you're seeing this go the same thing that all cottage industries that were diversified, consolidation, and the same way that Starbucks is now dominant rather than individual coffee shops or anything else, they're doing that in the sound reinforcement business. They have the economic clout to buy up the littler ones and make them part of their system, get the efficiencies of that.
Go ahead, John.
I don't know anything about this particular purchase, but there's only a few different reasons why one company acquires another. It's an expensive but effective way to take large steps forward. Sometimes a company has excess capital and they want to put their money to work for them instead of just sitting in a bank. Sometimes they feel like they've gotten behind in a particular niche market and they want to catch up quickly. And sometimes they just want to acquire the talent behind that company and make sure that they have the best people working for them. So those could be some reasons why they would do it.
Yeah, and I think that everyone in the concert business is hedging their bets around this. The artists clearly don't want to do as many shows as they want them to do. So, and the artists are starting to rebel. So you're seeing them cancel shows, shorten dates. All of those things are all part of the artists just getting tired of it. They, and tired of, they're just getting pushed too far. And so I think that everyone who's built a business around this has to look at how are they going to go into the rest of the century, because it's not going to be 60 city tours or 80 city tours or 120 city tours. Within 5 to 10 years, my prediction is it'll be between 10 and 20 cities is what these artists will do. And they're going to make more money online performing, and they're going to do less touring because it's just not good for their health. So and as soon as they find a way to make money not touring, I mean, every artist that's seen some of the stuff that I've been working on is like, when do I get to stop touring? It's just they're immediately, that's the first thing that comes out of their mouth every single time. Like, they are not doing this. They'll tell you that they're doing it because they love to meet their fans, but they're really doing it for the money. So the first couple are to meet the fans, and then after that, they're just trying to make sure that they can make a living. Next question.
Next question comes from Justin Blankenship in Lebanon, Virginia. Are there any resources that allow an audience to participate live during a presentation, such as plugins or apps that work with popular presentation software? Think Kahoot, but with presentations.
There's lots of tools that are available for that. I mean, so Kahoot is one. I mean, Kahoot, some people are using actually, but then there is Slido, which is owned now by Cisco, that does that. We've customized Makana in times to make that happen so that we can actually let people. I mean, we have polls that we don't use very much in the show, but we also have been able to we can go through any of the answers or questions that are looking for certain things, so people can put in fire or they can put in something else, and that means something to us, as it goes through. And so we've had incredible interactions with audiences. I will say that the the most popular interactive tool that we found over the last 15 years is questions, which is why we use them here. Now, being able to have an interactive conversation with the audience generally has been far more valuable. And we'll talk about this in the second hour. But I recommend when people talk to me, how long should I build a presentation? I'm like, maximum 10 minutes. Like that is how long you want it. You know, people, what right now the tradition is 40 minutes of talking, 10 minutes of questions. It should be reversed, you know, and so I think that finding ways that you can just let people ask the question so you can customize your presentation for your audience is what we have found so far to be the most popular thing to do. And everything else, in my opinion, is it's cute. You know, like it's they're toys. You know, so but authentic, conversation is the most powerful interaction. Next question.
Next question comes from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. I still struggle with the best way to collect and store digital information about everything. Is it Evernote or the more sophisticated The Brain database, or just the directory of your Mac or PC? Any smart insights?
Good, Courtney.
Well, if it's notes or things, especially if you want to share them with other people, I've been using Google Keep. That works because it's across all platforms. Works on tablets, Android, iOS, Mac, and PC. It stores things in the cloud. It stores, you can doodle on it. You can draw on it. You can store handwritten notes, or typewritten notes, or pictures, or audio, or whatever up there. And then you can have give other members access to your account so that you can share stuff with other people easily. So that's what I've been using. But as far as just a directory of my PC, I just use the Finder or the Explorer to find all my files. And the search has gotten much better on Windows and on the Mac as well.
Go, Peter.
I first of all, I would agree with Courtney. For things you're going to be sharing, Google Keep is the easiest path to go down. But I've used OmniFocus for years for keeping track of things that are personally used for me. And I mean, it takes some discipline. All this stuff, whether it's the Brain, which is a mind map based tool, or OmniFocus, it takes some discipline to set them up and use them consistently. It took me a long time to get away from sticky notes.
Go ahead, Bill.
I kind of remember the day I realized that my notes on my Mac were being synchronized across not just my machines, but my pads and my phone and everything else. And I just dove deeper into that. And that's the one tool I probably can't live without in my life. And it's not that it was the best thing in the world when it started out, but it keeps evolving and keeps getting better. And now I have a very complex 20-year library, well, not 20, but probably 15-year library of all sorts of important data for me, and it just follows me everywhere. I love it.
Yeah, I have to admit that I've been using Notes for so long that I just kind of stick with that. I'm not really trying to be cross-platform, or oftentimes when it comes to keeping track of what I'm thinking about or working on, I find that if I try to make it cross-platform, if I try to figure out some platform's going to work for everybody, it just doesn't work for me. Like I can't easily do what I need to do, and then I don't write it down, and then I don't remember it. so I really have focused on, the nice thing about Notes is that as an Apple user, they end up everywhere on my devices or any devices that I set up to go there, and it's such a key part of it. It's probably the app that Apple makes that I use the most, and again, I can do a lot of those things, draw, take pictures, do all the things that you can do on those things. And if I needed to do it cross-platform, I'd probably use Google Keep. The problem really is that Google Keep is just, it requires logins and other things on my phone. And it's not particularly fluid on an iPhone, at least when you just log into it. So I don't, I haven't found it to be something that I like using. Next question.
I just want to throw in that I've been starting to look into the app and website Notion, and it's extremely powerful. If the further you dig in, you can get it to the point where you're actually having a database with different variables. So it's extremely powerful, or it's as simple as just writing a note or dropping a file next to a note, and it's cross-platform and web-based. So
that's great. Next question.
Next question is from Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania. Just noticing the Apple Store is in Be Right Back mode. New products today?
Go ahead, John.
If you believe Apple Insider, Mac Rumors, and Mark Gurman, it's a new iPad Pro with the M2 chip in it.
Oh, my bank account just caught fire. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say before I turned off my TV this morning, I heard them promoting Apple has a big announcement today, but I didn't hear what it was before we went live.
Well, hopefully it'll happen before Mac break. That's all I have to say. Next question.
Sure. Next question from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. What's the most portable kit you can envision for 3 cameras and a PowerPoint to broadcast? Currently for run and gun, using 3 iPhones and 2 iPads in Switcher Studio with a mic and mixer are my current loadout.
Just looking at it. I think that I think the most portable kit that I would probably use is, it depends on where you're trying to send it. But you could use the iPhones, I think are fine. I mean, I would probably not use Switcher Studio. I'd probably use an ATEM. You only have 4 inputs, and so an ATEM Mini would probably be all you need. ATEM Mini Pro would be something that'd be relatively compact, and you could stream RTMP from there or send it into a computer. And then you would probably, a laptop for your PowerPoint, or even a B-Link or a MyLay by Courtney. Go ahead, Peter.
I was about to say, it depends on your definition of portable. My smallest build out when I go out to scout camps and things like that is 4 1510 Pelican cases. One for one for the main camera, one for 2 more cameras, one for the audio, one for the video, including an ATEM Mini Pro. Right, but that I don't know how portable that is, but I think that's probably relatively small compared to what you build out, Alex.
Yeah. So our small kit is about 22 cases. Yeah. So it's that's the little one. But I think that, we've been looking at a lot of how to get to a small kit. And I think that what I usually think about is 2 people with we used to have really small kits that we built. And the goal was really 2 1510s with what they needed plus backpacks, and if they have any clothing, they'd have to check it. So those are the carry-ons that we would send out with folks, and we could definitely fit it into that, and you could fit this into that. I probably wouldn't. I probably, instead of Switcher Studio, would probably just use an ATEM for that, but that's up to you. Go ahead, and then I would use that second iPad for mix effect. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree with the ATEM because with the new price drop for $295, you can get an ATEM Mini Pro with streaming built in. It has its own switcher. It has multi-view. It has, it can have audio, but
yeah,
you can use it for audio, but it's not great. But and it even has the ability to fall back from Ethernet direct to Ethernet connection back to a phone. Hooked up to the USB input, so that's all set up for streaming. So that's be the way to go.
Next question.
Next question from Chris Widener. Again, talking about the Apple Store is down. Teasers for a new announcement from Tim Cook predictions.
Everyone's paying attention. I did put my name up. I don't need to do it. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, this is about the time of year that they used to do a live from Cupertino thing. And it's been interesting. People have talked about the fact that is this the beginning of them just announcing things as opposed to doing those big productions? Not that they will not do any more of those, but that they will more often take niche products like the iPad Pro and just do an announcement of it and not make the big in-person rollout a necessity for all of their devices. I'm kind of leaning that may be a part of it because those things have gotten to the point where there's 5 or 6 or 7 products featured. And I think the individual products get lost a little bit in the big, gigantic Tim Cook rollouts.
Yeah, I think they're just getting out of the way for the big Final Cut announcement that's going to happen later in the month. Just trying to make sure that nothing gets in between that, and they have to release all the new M2 products to take full advantage of it. And then I expect to see Tim Cook and the Apple Final Cut team up there on stage. They're going to do this one live. I think that's where we're going with it. So
Final Cut Neural, and they're not going to have any hardware. They're all just going to think it.
Are they? Is there a Final Cut Summit this year?
I've heard rumors that there is one coming up, but right now they're on a kind of a Future Media Concepts is on kind of a global tour.
Right.
And they're doing Final Cut stuff around the country. So I don't know if that's going to affect whether or not they do the summit.
Be a lot more visible if they did it online. Just saying, like they're going on a tour. I didn't even know it existed until right now. So anyway, and I, have used Final Cut for a little while. Next question.
Next question from Douglas Carmichael. I've heard rumors that Apple will be releasing the M2 Max in November and the iPad Pro today. Do you think that's because the iPad is eclipsing the Mac in sales?
Go ahead, John.
I think it's because there's more of a market in the immediate future for iPads. I think a lot of people buy iPads for the holiday quarter, and they're trying to make sure that people are aware of the new iPads before people do their shopping. Macs, on the other hand, are more commonly bought in the summer and spring for both corporate and education purposes. So I think it's probably just they have a certain number of chips, and they have to figure out where to put them that will sell the most.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and Douglas, the iPod eclipsed the Mac in sales, so I don't think that's the reason.
Yeah, you had to probably pick one. I don't, and I do agree with John that most likely that iPad has more of an impact for the holiday sales than the Mac Minis, and the Mac Minis, I will say, are something that will sell on its own. Like people who buy them don't even need an event. We just need to know that it happened. Next question.
Next question, Peter Moore again from Auckland, New Zealand, providing some clarification on his previous question. If I'm streaming, say, music or some event, is it easy to insert a QR code into the stream so people can scan it and take them wherever, or for more info on said event? I'm assuming this should be easy.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it is. Just put up the QR code on an iPad or something like that. Use a little ATEM or something like that. Take that as a thing. The problem for me is always, I'm thinking to myself, how long is it going to take for somebody to understand what I'm doing, pull their phone out of their pocket, take a picture of that, pull up the QR reader app, take a picture of it. I guess you don't have to do that anymore on the iPhones, but if you have a phone, you need to do that. So it adds a little friction to the process. Now, if you tell people ahead of time that you're going to be doing this and give them a registration screen up front so that they have their phone ready and the QR code reader is loaded and set to go, then additional QR codes that you want to feed to them becomes pretty frictionless. So that's the only thing I worry about, is just getting through that initial friction of getting somebody ready to interact with a QR code in a live performance.
I am trying to show you this. Let's see if I get this right here. There we go. See, you can just put one around. Go ahead. Try this QR code. Just go ahead. You just hit it there. See, there's the QR code that I created for you, Bill. Everyone, go ahead and hit that QR code.
I am there.
Oh, it's an ad.
It's an ad.
Sorry.
Right. So let me get skip ads. There we go. I have officially been rickrolled for the first time in maybe 3 years. I can reset my counter finally. Thank you, Alex.
So that's how you can rickroll people with the QR code too. Unfortunately,
there's an ad in front of the rickroll.
I know. I think that's paying for his retirement. Like that is like that. I mean, it's been seen 1 billion times or something like it. It's or 1.4 billion times. It's crazy or
well
something.
Played,
like that.
sir. Well played.
Anyway, yeah. So that now I could have just as an aside, that QR code. I could have done a DVE and put it down below, and then rickrolled you more subtly than the way I did do it. I got this idea because someone talked on Twitter about they crocheted a QR code to rickroll people and just put it in their set behind them, and I am so going to do that.
Oh my gosh!
So
that's awesome.
that QR code, I'm ruining it for everyone now. So anyone in a meeting with me here, but I'm just going to have something in the back that just has a QR code, and if someone during a meeting hits it, you'll know because you'll hear it. But I think I'm going to have to pull a segment of it and put it on a website somewhere, because it's the ad is the real problem. Is the rickroll, because it is a downer. If they have premium, it rickrolls them perfectly. If they don't, then it doesn't work. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have an ATEM Mini, you can just put your laptop into input 1, and then whenever you hit the picture-in-picture, it can appear over your shoulder, like that little one in the corner there, automatically, and just pop it in and put it in any one of the 4 corners.
Yeah, I was trying to move too quickly. Yeah, so I I should be able to. Let's see if I can do this here real quick here. And then if I turn on my upstream key, oh, that was way too big. So anyway, it takes a little time to get it scaled up. But the point is that one thing I will say about QR codes in general, to get back to what Bill was talking about, is that I would recommend keeping them on a lot. So if you want someone to interact, don't look at something like, hey, I'm going to put a QR code up for you to do something right now. It's more of you can find more information about what we're doing and just leave that QR code up all the time or over long spans. But definitely think it's going exactly what was talked about earlier. Think about 2 minutes is your minimum time for a QR code, and talk about the QR code if you can during that. When I use the QR codes that I build, we leave them up for 10, 20, 30 minutes at a time, so that people see that QR code. They've got plenty of time to manage that QR code. They can interact with it, and oftentimes when they're not watching the show. So if a pre-show is a great place for a QR code, a post-show, but otherwise lower third during it, maybe with a message of what it's going to do when you get there, unless you're rickrolling them. Anyway, go Peter.
I was about to say, I often have used QR codes using the Courtney's technique over the shoulder, and just leave it there during probably about 5 minutes worth of, I hate to say this, talking head, where we refer to the QR codes there. But if you really want to get into detailed information, go to the QR code, and you can find it, whatever it might be. A lot of times I hate to say it's boring manual stuff that goes in the Boy Scout manuals, but here
right.
You can find it here.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Because I don't want to talk about it all.
Exactly.
One thing, having just purchased a new TV, I might warn you that more and more OLEDs are going out there, and if you're going to leave a QR code permanently in the corner every time you're on, you risk ruining a lot of people's OLEDs.
Yeah. That is the issue if you're doing broadcast. If you're doing it to bars or something like that, most bars don't do that, because anybody who has anything that will go past will not put an OLED in if they're smart. And if they do put an OLED in, then they should have researched it more. But if you're thinking about that stream, but yeah, the OLEDs, generally the rule for OLEDs used to be about 15 seconds. It's really closer to 10 minutes now before they're really going to start burning in. So if you move things around, and of course you can take something like a QR code and move it from one place to another every couple minutes. And most modern OLEDs will A, not be sensitive to it, and B, can be reset with tools within the TV. So those are things that have gotten a lot better. But yeah, leaving them on for 45 minutes will definitely leave the QR code there forever. Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. What tool have you used to grab tweets from a hashtag to bring them on air?
And there is actually, we're going to be let you know that Mokana will as we kind of moved forward, and Mokana will refer to it more as the sister app, which is Commenda. Commenda is the other app that we have, and that's what we use to do that. So Commenda will attach to YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, and Twitch, and suck in Twitch. We haven't used it for that. We've discussed it, but Twitter is one of the bigger ones, and it'll just suck in everything with that QR code, and then lets us manage the back end the way we would manage it here. There are, I think that H2R Graphics also has their own tools to do that, as well as StreamYard also can do those things. And there's a couple tools for vMix that will do those as well. So those are the ones that I know of. Oh, and MemoLive. MemoLive has its own tools that will pull those in. So a lot of different tools that are out there to pull in those hashtags. Twitter is probably the easiest and most useless all at the same time, because it's the easiest one to go find hashtags and pull in. There's not a lot of tokenizing and all these other, and there's not a lot of approvals. You just go in and grab it. The problem is that most of the content is usually not nearly as useful as many other ones, because the problem with Twitter, when you ask people to use a hashtag, is you're asking people to put something about your event in their stream. And if they have any more than a couple hundred followers, they don't want to do that. So once you get to, 300, 500, 1,000 followers, you don't want to just start putting in hashtags for people to answer your question about something that your followers don't necessarily know why you're doing that. And so someone like me with 40,000 followers, I'm not going to ask any questions over Twitter. So if that's my only avenue to do it, whereas with Facebook or YouTube, it's specific to that event. You're asking questions inside of that event at that time, not a general process. And so that's why Twitter tends not to get very good questions most of the time. Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego, California. In listening to podcasts and shows, vocal fry seems more common now. Does vocal fry affect recording technique and mic placement, etc.?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you want fries with that? Yeah, vocal fry.
Can you define vocal fry?
Yes, it's something like that, where you get down and you slow down the air so that your vocal cord, you can actually hear your vocal cords flapping. So you're not as full voiced, and because you're not as full voiced, it's a fairly subtle effect. So you have to be fairly close to the microphone, but you got to walk a careful line to not get too close, so that the proximity effect is very pronounced. And when you get closer, you'll also start to pick up more mouth noise. So if you're a spitter, be careful, because you're going to pick up all those smacks and lip smacks and things like that when you're closer recording your vocal fry.
Next question.
I heard next question a couple of times. Is that a recording? What was that coming from? Anyway.
No, nobody. It's not coming from anybody.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I looked it up just because I wanted to make sure that I was correct about it. And the technical definition is the lowest register tone of your voice characterized by its deep, creaky, breathy sound. It's I think become popular because there's so many vocal teachers on the web now talking about technique. And I think the problem is if you're just doing it in speech and something like that, it won't have any effect on your voice at all. But if you try to sound like some of those screamo singers, they're particularly were big about 10 years ago, who sang with a very croaky, nasty tone for long periods of time, I would imagine that doing significant damage to your vocal cords if you're a performer. Mm-hmm. And if you want to go in that direction, you probably need to talk to a professional voice teacher or otolaryngologist to make sure that you're not messing with your vocal cords and permanently damaging them.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question from David Brady in New York, New York. On my way down to NAB, New York City, what should I be focusing on?
Oh, man.
Traffic.
Traffic. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Bill.
Interacting with office hours, of course. If you're going to be on the floor of NAB, we're going to have some certain expectations. You're a part of the family. We expect live inserts hourly, at least.
I'd love to see you in after hours talking about that. Definitely what we'd love to see is, what does it look like there? It sounds like there's a lot of small booths. There's a rumor that the booths were limited in size to 20 feet. 20 by 10 was or 20 by 20 or 20 by 10 was the largest booth someone could get there. So it'll be interesting to see. It should be a lot of little booths. Again, it would have been probably pretty good to cover. We just didn't quite get enough critical mass to do that. But because the little booths are a lot easier to cover than the big booths. So it'll be interesting to see who showed up. I'm curious to see how empty it was. I couldn't tell from the map. Different maps showed different things. So, did they fill the room? Did they not fill the room? I don't think that there's any specific product announcements. So I don't know if there's anything for us to see there. So it'll be, but I would love to see what perks your interest. Of course, AES is right next to it. So we'd love to see what's there and anything that you think, David, anything that you think is cool, we'd like to know what it is. All right, next question.
Next question from Chris Ward in Berlin, Delaware. Is anyone going to watch the Unreal Fest live stream today and tomorrow, or at a later time zone convenient date? I think it's mostly games focused, but maybe some interesting office hours topics.
I'll probably watch it later. I'm probably not going to watch it live. I don't know what I would need to I think the part of it is that I don't see a lot of interaction. So if I don't see a lot of interaction in the live event, then that usually gets pulled off to I will watch this at some time in the future where I can scan through it. The big thing is I just want to be able to skip through to the next thing and not watch it. So the only reason to watch it live, the only reason to watch an event live for me is if they're going to actually interact with the audience, or if the audience is going to interact with each other. So we watch Apple events together because we can all talk about it while we're doing it. But if there's not any real time solution, if we, that it doesn't make as much sense. And especially something all day is just hard to schedule. It's easier to do that as a 1 or 2 hour session. Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Wurzburg, Germany. There's a new double-sized screen from LG around. It contains a twice as high screen surface as usual and uses 2 HDMI ports. Does the panel consider this as a good alternative for 2 separate monitors?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, one thing is to make your eye contact a little more problematic because you can't wedge a camera in between those 2 screens that you could with 2 screens vertically, one above the other. You could stick the camera in the middle, unless you've got one of those little cameras on a stick that sticks in the middle of your screen in that case. But other than that, it gives you a nice bigger screen arrangement. But I would get a sore neck probably going up and down, up and down.
Yeah, I think that for me, I prefer to have multiple monitors. I don't even like really big ones. For me, I like 24-inch monitors. I like lots of them. I throw them on arms and move them around. So I've got kind of an array going around me. And I like to, in 24-inch increments, make choices about where data is showing up for me and how it is showing up for me. So I don't think that an extra wide or tall monitor would make a difference for me. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, considering it actually is just 2 monitors, this looks like a packaging convenience more than anything else for people. I mean, I'm kind of with Courtney. I'd rather have, and you, Alex, more monitors I could move around and adjust as I see fit, as opposed to this large monolithic block of screen.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I've used 2 or 3 configurations that had a monitor mounted over. In fact, my voiceover rig in one stage, if I could pull that up, was vertical. And yes, if you can look up and down a lot, but I use that as a standing voiceover rig. And I never had a problem with it because the primary thing I spent most of my time doing was up, and that kept my physiology kind of just standing straight. So I've worked with vertical things. In fact, right now I'm in front of a laptop, the teleprompter, and a large screen monitor, which I have up there, and I'm doing a split out of my monitor because I find it really easy to read text up there. So if somebody puts up something and it has a lot of fine detail, I can just glance up and see that. It's whatever you get used to. And I think your muscles get used to it over the course of time.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it does make you look more religious if you're looking up all the time.
Next question.
From Brody Hefner in New York City. The new Axun Simo iOS HDMI smartphone adapter at $179 converts an iPhone iPad into a camera monitor with scopes and limited recording streaming capabilities. Is this an attractive alternative to Atmos and Blackmagic monitors?
In itself, it's not, but it is a really interesting product. I'm very curious as to how it provides that content. So I'm super interested in this product. I didn't know it existed. I'm glad Brody pointed it out. I'm probably going to buy one to test it and figure it out. I can sit there with my other things that I bought that people talked about that I end up finding some work. So anyway, the thing that'd be really interesting here is that this also is another way for those of us using wired connections. As you know, there's the tablet app that's being worked on, and but it requires NDI. This would allow us to do HDMI out and to the iPad. If it allowed us to go both ways, it'd be really interesting. But it'd be interesting to see, whether you could start drawing over things. That's what I look at immediately. Is it's now delivering streaming to the iOS device. So I think that could be interesting. It's not going to make any difference to Atomos or Blackmagic because there's all these other features that are available. Now, if this is going to provide it to apps that kind of build an ecosystem around that, like they can analyze if we get scopes and if it can be seen as just a regular camera, that gets really interesting. So there's a lot of scope apps and so on and so forth for the phone that currently just use the phone's input. If we can use another camera's input and then be able to do that could be pretty interesting. Go ahead,
Courtney. Is it just like a capture card where it converts it to webcam format and brings it in over the USB bus, or?
Yeah, it's going to convert it to H.264 or H.265, I think, or H.264 video. It says that it's handling 30 megabits per second at 8-bit. So it is, it's not going to be a uncompressed input to that device. But again, as a viewer, as adding a separate window to it, it's probably a pretty slick little solution. And again, if it shows up as a camera to other applications, if it's only their app and it's just to use as viewing, it's useful, but not incredibly useful. If they make it available to other, other people writing code that can put up scopes or put up other things or use that as a way to stream, all those things start to become really interesting. So it'll be interesting to see whether they look for that extensibility. And for our producers, we're cutting through these questions. We probably have a room for some more if you're interested in asking those before we get to the top of the hour, or we'll just start on presentations early. Next question.
From Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, I upgraded to the iPhone 14 Pro Max and am amazed at how well MagSafe holds, but not with my OtterBox case on. What cases are people using that are drop rated with MagSafe for production use? The Ulanzi ST28 is my new favorite phone holder.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, one of the things, I was in the Apple store not long after I got my new iPhone, and I noticed their cases actually have kind of a target in the back that is the MagSafe area. So they obviously were designed for them. They're protective cases. I don't remember the name of the manufacturer. It's a third party, but Apple has them in their app stores. So I figure it would be pretty safe in terms of its MagSafe functionality.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yes, so I also have the 14 Pro Max, and I just got in the mail the Peak Design Everyday case, and so it's rated at 6 foot drop. It's not like an OtterBox that could be thrown around, that probably, and it also has the SIM link on the back, which you can buy accessories that would allow you to put it on a tripod, put it on a motorcycle, and put it on your car, whatever. And so it actually securely locks in here. But this also works great with my MagSafe accessories. They hold firmly, no problem.
Yeah, and I definitely hook it to. I use the same one. So this is mine. This is a little wallet. Thanks, Hosmuk. And this snaps on there, and that just slides on there. But this will also this little connector. Right now, I have my older one, my iPhone 13, in the same version of this, and it's shooting a time lapse of the stage that we're doing right now. And I was able to I had a quarter 20. I drop it onto the tripod, snap it in, go. It was really nice and easy. So the Peak Design ones I think are pretty good. It doesn't really protect the screen other than it lips over a little bit. So if the screen hits a corner or something like that, it's still going to break. Whereas if the but it won't do that like an OtterBox. But I can tell you I've dropped it many times and it's been fine. So far I've done well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. In an article about the latest Red Hot Chili Peppers tour, the front-of-house engineer mentioned that transients are so much faster on the Yamaha PM5000 analog console they're using. What could they mean by that?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, when they hire transients to run the board, they just kidding. Homeless people got to work too, What they're talking about is a transient is how steep a square wave can you put into it, because in A to D converters these days, everything's really a sine wave. Even a square wave is made up of small sine waves with a very fast transient between the low and the high. And the faster that transient, the steeper the waveform rises, the more harmonics it generates, even an odd harmonics, which give it a richer sound. So if you're dealing with electronic music with a lot of square waves or anything with a lot of high frequency fast attacks, it's going to give you more harmonics and give you a little bit fuller or richer sound. That's my take on it.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Alex, you mentioned the importance of not just applying to jobs, but having a portfolio of projects that show competency. Where do you see the value of industry certifications in the hiring process versus individual demonstrations of capability?
It just really depends on the certification. I think that there are definitely certifications that folks pay attention to. I can tell you that in our industry, there are almost no certifications that particularly matter. In the tech industry, in IT and lots of other things, They are looking for certain certifications because it's the easy way to sort people. That they at least went through the trouble of trying to learn how to do certain things. So if you're looking for something in a more IT or those types of things, I think that you may be able to find certifications useful. The ones that are probably more more applicable in the future are going to be things like Google, Grow with Google, because Google is building training that is specific to them, and you're going to see more and more certification where big companies are looking for certification, but they're building those around the tools that they need, the people that they need. Now, the Grow with Google certifications are going to be used by a lot of different companies, but you're basically building, into working for Google, and so Google's going to cherry pick that system. Go ahead, John.
A certification will help you get an interview. And then you need to demonstrate at the interview that you can do the job. And if you go to an interview without a portfolio, no one's going to trust that you can do the job, no matter what you have written on your resume.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, in the old days, I actually did a huge project for a major bank. They were acquiring another bank, and so we had to look at just all sorts of resumes. So it was an interesting thing. First of all, the flood was so big that it's astonishing that they ever can winnow, 500,000 resumes down to one. I mean, it's just crazy. The numbers are just so big. So it seemed to me that what they were looking for, this is what I thought back then, acceptability, which means that you've got things on your resume that make you possible so that you don't get dumped out with the large number of resumes they get that don't have any. Then after that, you're moving up to the next level, and they're looking for expertise to get you farther in the winnowing process. And the last piece of the puzzle is mastery, things that demonstrate mastery. Most of the time, a resume can't do anything but the first job. So I think the higher you're aiming, it depends on what kind of job you're looking for, but the higher you're aiming, the more refined your resume has to be to get away from those original, you're okay, because they don't care about that. Everybody at the top level is going to be okay. And even beyond competent, because they're going to have a choice of a lot of competent people. What they're looking for is something that you have that nobody else has, whether that's the way you write or the way you handle yourself in a live interview or your comfort level sitting down across from them so that you can banter a little bit and tell a few jokes rather than just feeling like, oh my gosh, this guy needs this job and he's just going to say anything to get it. All those subtle little things become the bigger deal for getting the actual job, I think, over time. So I haven't had a resume in probably 20 years, and I don't think I'll ever have another one. If people don't know what I can do now from all the things that I have done that they can research, then there's no chance they're going to hire me.
And go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I would agree with Bill and John both. I mean, the resume gets you in the door. Now, I got advised years ago to also keep a CV, which is not a resume. Just keep that in mind. That is not a resume. That's your life history, your life professional history. So I came out of an industry that I'm not sure how you would have had a portfolio of data centers.
Right.
That'd be, but you could point to things. Here are the white papers I've written and had published and things like that. And so those are useful things to have on a CV that you could pass around, but it gets you in the door. Demonstrated competence will keep you in the door.
Yeah, and it's the hardest way to get jobs is to apply for them without knowing the person on the other side. I don't know when I've gotten a job from that. Maybe never. Like that I've ever gotten a job that I was just applied and someone who didn't know me hired me. I was always recommended by somebody, or I met somebody at a job and got to know them. And so I don't really have, it really is, that's the easiest way to do it. It just takes a lot of, it does take a lot of time. You work with a lot of people. You try to get connected to a larger network, or you do. And really it's just about being useful within that network, and then things start to pop out, but you can't try to force them to do that, because then immediately anything that you invested in is washed away. So you really just have to be useful, and then a lot of things show up on their own. Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. What's a good way to rack mount Mac Minis?
Sonnet. Sonnet makes a 1U 2 Mac Mini connection. We use lots of them. and that I don't know of anyone else that makes one as good as the one that Sonnet makes. They also make one that we're looking at pretty closely, which is Sonnet on one, or a Mac Mini on one side and a card on the other, so that we can do 8 outputs and just rack that in and have a bunch of outputs there. So that's another option. But Sonnet is the best solution. Next question.
Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Alex, would you explain yet once again your method for annotating on your screen during office hours? I still have not grasped how this is done.
Okay, great. So what we have is I have an ATEM switcher and I have a Mac Mini. I'm going to slowly get better at this. I have a Mac Mini, and then I have a Wacom tablet. So this is the Wacom tablet, the ATEM, and the Mac Mini. I've tried to do this different every time because I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it. Anyway, so the Wacom tablet has a USB that goes into the Mac Mini. That tells it where I am, where this is. The Mac Mini has an HDMI that goes out to the ATEM. So it's just one of the inputs. It's input 8 on my. It's the last one in there. Gets the Wacom, and it's just black and white. So if I cut to 8, you'll see that it's let's see here. Hold on. Here we go. So you'll see that now that has the key over top of it, but it's just a white board with a black there. So that's what that actually does. And so it's basically then the ATEM, its HDMI, its program output goes back into the Wacom. So I can see what I'm doing. Inside the Wacom tablet, I'm using a downstream key, and that downstream key is basically saying, take a color as my fill, and as my key, take that black and white image that's being created by, and I think I can do this actually more effectively if I do this and I do that. That's actually what I'm producing, is a black and white image there that looks like that. And then it gets filled because it's using green as a fill and it's using that as a key. And that's pretty much it. So that's how this all works. It's a pretty simple setup. You can use anything that'll create a black and white image that you can draw with a pen on your Wacom tablet. I'm using the Wacom 1 because it's cheaper, and this is all I needed to do. And it sits inside of I have a monitor stand, like a 2-arm monitor stand. And then you can get a Visa to kind of a iPad or tablet holder that I attach to it, so I can just swing it around. So there's little extra details there, but that's how that works. Next question. Oh, Bill, you're going to say something real quick?
Well, just if you're using Keynote, if you don't need a live picture, if you just want to do that, you can actually literally now with the new iPads, they've got a whole system where you can really easily do this and put highlights
Keynote.
up on things. Keynote, I'm sorry. So Keynote has a built-in system for doing this if you want to. It's really easy to use.
And by the way, if you want to do it with Keynote also, you can if you set it to present. So what I do is I'll set it to present and I'll give it 40 white slides and hit present. That way it won't do the 16 by 10 or whatever it's doing. It'll go full 16 by 9 out because it's in presentation mode. Then I can draw on it and it will circle things. The only problem is I can't see what I'm doing. And so again, Michael Forrest, who's is building his own that'll take NDI in, NDI out. Mine's a hardware solution. That's all. Next question.
Next question from Tommy Shant, St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm exploring ambisonic recording. Is there a future in this?
I think there's a lot of. I think ambisonic's really fun. And we're going to play more and more with surround recording. I have a Sennheiser Ambio that I play with a little bit, and I've now that I've extracted my Scorpio from my live daily setup, I'm getting to play with it a little bit more. Go ahead, Courtney.
There's some people that are publishing them for ASMR, for sleep studies, things like that, recording, jungle sounds, rainforest sounds, distant thunderstorms. Those are all great sleeping long loops. Of course, holographic or holophonic, recording has been around just with binaural recording and dummy heads that have 2 microphones in the ears for recording basically a 360 sound for years. Ambisonic's a bit different because it uses 4 microphones and 4 discrete channels to record, and then you can mix it into a spatial area later to taste. But to get full effect of it, you really need to be listening out of headphones for binaural and through a dimensional sound system with 4 speakers or Atmos or something like that to really hear the effect of it.
Yep. Next question.
Chris Widener back again. There seems to be conflicting info on if the 13 Pro Max case will fit the 14 Pro Max.
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, it depends on defined fit. I mean, dimensionally it will fit, but it won't protect the lenses as well because the 14 lenses on the camera stick out farther from the back. So you need to have a deeper lip around the lenses to protect them. They look almost identical. You just have to stare at them and you realize, oh, 13 will leave the lenses exposed if you lay it down on its back.
Hey, Bill, real quick.
What Peter said.
Next question.
Ike Potter, Hanover, Germany. Would it make sense for a Zoom participant to use an anamorphic lens on the camera and feed the picture after de-squeezing into a meeting? Have you ever seen this?
No, and I don't think it would make sense. You don't have enough resolution to do that effectively. So if you squeeze it and then unsqueeze it, you're just going to end up with a lower resolution image. So I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it in the current. I mean, if you're doing 4K for 1080p, maybe. But either way, I don't think there's any reason to do it. 16 by 9 is solid. It's a solid format for what we do. I don't think that 235 just reduces what the average person on the average viewing is going to see. So if you're doing 235 or 185 or all the other wider screen formats, you're just reducing what most users are going to see it as because their screens are 16 by 9. So I think the 16 by 9 is a pretty solid solution. I know a lot of people experiment with it. I think it makes sense in cinema. I don't think it makes sense anywhere else. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into the next hour talking about presentations. So for our panelists, go ahead if you have a couple things you want to say before we get to the questions. Go ahead and throw them in right now. So I think it's an interesting topic to talk about presentations. I will say that I build a lot of presentations. My presentations, I realized before the show that most of mine are about internal things. So I don't really do external presentations very often, but I do some. But one of the things that you have to think about is this presentation something you want people to walk away with, or is it something that you want them to watch? And those kinds of presentations aren't the same to me, at least. So the one that I plan to present will have almost no text. I use text as the last resort. Usually, if I'm putting up text on the slide, I just gave up. Like I was like, well, that's the best I can do. I will almost never do bullet points. I'll never do lists. I'll definitely won't do paragraphs. The big thing is that I feel like I want them to pay attention to what I'm talking about. I don't want them to be reading the slide while I put it up. We did a lot of eye tracking. So it's one thing for people to be in a meeting with you online. It's another thing to see how long are they actually paying attention, because basically what we found is that if someone's in an active listening mode, they are going to absorb 2 or 3 times as much content from you. They're going to be able to remember it. Their retention rates are much higher. So how do we keep them in an active area? Well, switching to passive means that they're going to drop dramatically. We see people switch to passive mode for a presentation when someone's talked between 5 and 6 minutes. That seems to be the outer limit. When they put up a slide or any group of slides, we see that number drop 60 to 90 seconds. So at that point, you are burning up in the atmosphere every time you put up a slide. So the only time I do it for longer than that, or I might do a long presentation, you see me do them here, is when they're pictures and there's stories around those pictures. It's pretty much the only time I feel like we can get away with a long slide is not diagrams, but pictures of an experience and then being able to talk to that experience are the only places that we found that we can do that. So you'll see me break that rule for that one reason, but very rarely will I put up anything that has a diagram or text for very long, because it's usually, when they say death by PowerPoint, they usually mean death to people listening to you about PowerPoint. So it's really important to kind of, really think carefully about it and treat it the way it is, which is what we would tend to refer to as fissionable material. You turn it on and you're literally destroying your audience almost immediately. So it better be good, and sometimes it's useful. And when it's integrated with what you're talking about, it can be. There's great reasons to have visualization of it so that people can get a picture of what you're talking about, and you're underlining things. But you have to be very, very careful, because it's probably one of the most dangerous things you can do in a presentation is add a slide. And unfortunately, most people don't know that. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to remember that a presentation is a time-based communication event. It has someone who's the sender, who's sending a message, to someone who's a receiver. And we confuse that with a slide deck. A slide deck can be part of a presentation, but most people, out of laziness, they turn their slide deck into everything, into their personal notes, into the handout to send to people afterwards. And it's because in corporations, people aren't paying attention in meetings, and then they say, can you send me your slide deck? So it is really, really helpful to think about what message am I trying to send, and then make sure that your design of any slide deck or other visual aids of any sort, whether it's a presentation or annotation on a screen or even your gestures or tone of voice, fits your message. It's about sending a message to someone else and making sure everything you add helps the audience focus on the message and acquire the message you're trying to send instead of showing what you can do with a piece of software.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, there are two things I would say, and they're somewhat unrelated. One, we keep saying death by PowerPoint, but it's any death by any presentation vehicle can follow. I don't care whether it's Google Slides or
Blackboard,
or the Blackboard. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, trust me, I've done enough Blackboards. But one of the things I got taught early on by people who'd been doing this longer than I have at the time was I very often now write a paper. Now, I don't mean write a presentation. I write a paper. That paper is not time-based, right, in terms of its maturity. You hand it to somebody, and here's this. The presentation should enhance the paper and give you the opportunity to explain some things if they have questions, right?
Yeah.
So it's not the words. It's minimal, but very well done explanatory graphics, maybe. But not, I don't expect them to take that presentation and walk away and understand what I was talking about. Read the paper.
You go, Bill.
Right? I mean, Gartner research notes are things I used to do.
And I will say that before I jump to Bill, one thing that I've gotten into the habit of doing is I build the paper. There's a deck with no words that I'm going to present. There's a paper. And the thing is that one thing that so for a long time, all my decks, because I was going to hand them out, were all over white. And the reason I did them over white was because I knew people were going to print them. And I printed out one deck that was over black or over a dark color, and the paper comes out wet. Like it just comes out like it's just like wet pages come out of it because it's so much ink. So I learned don't do that. And because a lot of people are printing them out so they can write notes on them or whatever. And so what I did is I learned to put them all over white. So all my presentations were over white. The other thing that happens is Apple's in Keynote, Apple's little magic key, their instant alpha looks better over white because it does have sometimes little white edges and so on and so forth. And so I kind of got into that mode for a decade. But I recently noticed that everybody is just putting them on. They're putting them on their iPads. They're putting them on their computers. They're not looking at it, and white is really painful, especially if you're in dark mode, which a lot of us are. And so that became kind of a painful thing to do. And so then I switched to black again, but then I had to figure out what are they going to print. And so all the information in the slides, and usually I line up my Pages document with my Keynote document so that you get kind of, this is where you saw that, but I line up all those notes. So there are slides in the Keynote, and oftentimes I put those slides in the Keynote into the Pages document so that they're little, but you can see what they are, or those diagrams, the same diagrams that you saw in Keynote get put into it. So they remember what those connections are. But it kind of takes a little bit of the Amazon.com. Amazon's notorious for not allowing you to use decks. so anyway, they don't want to see any decks because Jeff Bezos decided it was a waste. So because he felt like you weren't having intelligent conversations. The problem is that when you go to text, it does take you a lot longer to write the stuff down, and then you don't write as much down, and then you don't do as much, to make that work. So in some companies, they'll say everything in the company moves forward on a deck or a demo. And so, that you're going to have a deck that explains what's going on, or you're going to have a demo, or even better, both. And I will say that the one thing we should underline here is that decks oftentimes, people get promoted, become something, your ability to build a good deck is directly connected to your upward mobility in many, many, many corporations, especially when you get into the Fortune 100. Building great decks is a great way to keep moving forward. Go ahead, Bill.
I did a lot of work for about 10 years with the National Speakers Association, and it was really fascinating because I saw so many speakers who were good and bad, and there was never one thing that made somebody good or bad. The one thing I did come away with, though, that is really strong in my brain is beginner, intermediate, and advanced in two areas. Is the presenter beginning, intermediate, or advanced? And is the audience beginner, intermediate, or advanced? If you figure that out, then you will know whether or not the tools that you are using are appropriate. If you have an audience that has not had much exposure to the information you're about to present, but you've got to present to them, orientation material, which can be things like bullet points and things like that, if used in small things, can help them start to percolate ideas for themselves for interaction later. If they're intermediate, you want less of that. If they are advanced, I am a great subscriber to you want none of that, but it's audience dependent. And then for the presenter, the same thing. This is what the National Speakers Association surprised me so much. Literally, I remember somebody telling a group of starting speakers, you're making all these things on these easels and you are looking at them and you have them up on the front of the room. If you're going to present to the crowd, tear off all your big things and paste them in the back of the room, because their function is no longer to communicate with the audience. Their function is to communicate with you as the presenter, to keep you on target, to make sure you cover everything you're supposed to cover. And so that beginner, intermediate, advanced tier in both things, I think, is something that should be paid attention to. Where's your audience?
I do think that one of the things that people don't seem to understand when I watch a lot of them is that there is a notes section that can be added to their presentation, that they can actually put all their notes in there. So this happens in the places that we see a lot of text-heavy solutions tend to be science, academia, government, and some tech, verticals where folks just seem to put everything that they want to talk about on the slide rather than breaking it down. And I think everyone in their community is used to the abuse, and so they just kind of go along with it, and they know that they're going to get the deck later or whatever. But it's a truly painful thing to sit through, in my opinion. And I think that it's why we're having this meeting, is to slowly talk about what could maybe be done that isn't such a disaster. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, I see it a lot in vendors who are trying to pitch us things, and they put all the information into a slide deck, try to share it all in a 30-minute meeting, and assume we're going to retain any of it. And they think they're a lot better presenters than they are, and that it's going to be some sort of magical surprise when you see a slide with 20 different bullet points about how this will solve your problem. And the concept of sending a handout in advance is kind of like the old adage of tell them what you're going to tell them. And then the meeting itself is telling them. And then a follow-up email can be tell them what you told them, in that, if you want to use that framework. And it's way better. Half the human population are the kind of people who don't process quickly and on the spot. So if you send people information out in advance, it gives those people a chance to prepare and contribute, and leads to a much better conversation.
I will say that I resist sending decks. And I think it's partially because of how I build the decks. I resist sending decks ahead of time because I want to frame the conversation in the meeting. And so a lot of times I'll give them to you afterwards. But when I have a meeting to talk to someone about something, a lot of times I won't send you a deck beforehand, because I want to be able to talk to it, because I want to respond and answer your questions. Because the only danger about sending a deck out early, which is very popular, by the way, is that people will build opinions very quickly that may not be totally accurate to what you meant, or they'll go down and you give the more time they have to think about it, the more time they might build up resistance to what you're doing. And so what you may want to do is be able to have that conversation, have them ask that, and be able to underline that in real time. But I will admit that also, again, my presentations are very interactive, because I put up a slide, and then each slide, when I do it, is mostly an opportunity for a conversation, about those. I'm going to answer your questions. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to annotate it. So a lot of times for me, slides are getting drawn over all the time. So I feel like doing a presentation without a telestrator is super painful. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I was going to, your comment about Jeff Bezos. I mean, we used to, back in the late 90s, he worked for a gentleman at IBM by the name of Lou Gerstner, who was the CEO of the company at the time, only outside CEO the company's ever had. And he refused to sit through presentations. you sent him a paper, which drove most people nuts because you had to send him a paper ahead of time, and then he'd invite you in for a conversation.
Right.
Right. I mean, he would not sit through the presentation. But I mean, John is, I can't tell you how many times I remind people that old saw about tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, and keep it simple. And then in the pre-show, I know Bill and I were talking about the fact that I was notorious when doing customer briefings for the IBM company that they would have these professionally prepared glass slides and a 35 millimeter projector. And I'd never get off the first one. I would sit and have a chat with the potential clients, go up to the whiteboard and talk.
Yeah.
Because the first rule is know your subject matter, I've seen many people grab a deck and they don't know what they're talking about.
Right. Yeah. If you gave me a choice, you can only have a whiteboard or a deck, I will always take a whiteboard. Like I will always, go for the whiteboard, go for that. And that's why I love my Telestrator so much. So I can sit there and do what I would do normally on a whiteboard, but I would do it on over top of my deck or with my deck and outline those things. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
There's also different kinds of learners. And I know there's a lot of debate whether or not the idea of auditory learners, of visual learners is 100%. But I will note, it was interesting to me to see Tim Cook's Apple demonstrations and compare them to what Steve Jobs used to do. Steve was the master of simplicity, black turtleneck, everything has to be simple. And you'd get a slide with one word, and it was incredibly effective because you were locked on him. In these days, though, when you see a Cook presentation, he might throw up a slide of the M1 architecture and just leave it up there for 3 or 4 minutes. And I know as a viewer for that, because I'm pretty visually, will be, oh, look, there's the GPU section and look at how close it is to, and I'll analyze it in a passive way that doesn't detract from me understanding what he's talking about, but that brings new questions to my mind. Oh, I wonder why they did that. Oh, and look, that was interesting. They just recreated that on the other side for the double density M2. It's a complex slide, if the audience is aware of what you're talking about, can give them that something to chew on that's relevant and help them form their own opinions and questions about it.
Yeah, I think that it is one of those things that the visuals do help underline things. There's things that I can't talk about that I need a diagram to show how that's going to work. So it's not that I'm saying, I think the presentations are important and your deck is very important. It's just that I think that you should look at every word, every letter as a liability, like that you drop down. It's a liability. It's going to turn people off. So minimize that. You can put up those things. You can put up images, especially what Bill was talking about, the architecture, showing that, letting people kind of explore that while you're talking is fine. Just always know that if you put up something complex, they're not listening to you as much anymore. They're listening to that. So you're now, window dressing compared to what they're now trying to absorb. So by keeping it simple, it keeps them focused on what you're doing. Some breaking news, by the way, Apple did release some new products. The store is up. John, can you tell us what's new?
So I found some more products. So as we said earlier, it's new iPads, 4 different colors in the regular iPad 10 Gen, iPad Pro with the M2. The iPad, the bigger one has micro LEDs in it, which is cool, but the 11 does not. And they did a little bump on the Apple TV, nothing earth-shattering there. They put the A15 chip in it, and then they've got new keyboards for the iPads. That's all I've seen so far.
Yeah, and they have, I think that the M2 Air and M2 MacBook Pro, M2 MacBook Pro for the 13-inch. I really find Apple's approach to the MacBooks to be super frustrating now, that they release the 13 with an M2, but don't update the 16 at the same time. I find that to be odd and frustrating, for them to go down that path. But I will say that I'm more excited about the iPad anyway. I have to admit, I just spent so much money on shelves of all things that now I have to wait a little bit before I get the iPad. I'm a little frustrated by that. I'm going to try to figure out how to come up with some more cash. I looked at my bank account and I was like, oh, I can't go get an iPad right now. Anyway, the one that I want, because of course, when I look at the iPad, I go, oh, what's the top end iPad Pro that I can buy? And the thing is the interesting about the iPads is that they last for so long. The one I have here that I'm using for Mix Effect Pro for my show is, I don't know, 2 or 3 years old, and it works great, and I could interchange it. I don't know how much the new one would really make that much difference. So these iPads are so powerful now. It's just really amazing. So anyway, that's our.
I'm looking hopefully at the fact they didn't do the MacBook Pros, because I'm assuming that they did the base one just because it was easy and they weren't doing much. That must mean they're doing a lot to the bigger ones.
Well, hopefully, it's not that big of a deal for me, because what I really need is the Mac Mini. So like that's the M2 Mac Mini is something I'm really interested in. I just don't travel enough anymore. I don't go enough places where a laptop, you're paying so much extra for your laptop to go places. It better be good. Like I wouldn't want to use a laptop just to be at home, which is at home or the office. And I now have Mac Minis at both. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the first question.
First question comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. What are the general slide text and graphic rules to avoid death by PowerPoint?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I've worked a lot with a large client based on a rodent, and they have some of the best animators in the world, and these are corporate presentations that they present. And one of the worst things you can do is put up a static slide of, and they're fairly dry topics, demographics, sales last year in each demographic. So they'll put up a slide and they'll go through all of the points. But they do a lot of builds. So they'll start with the topical slide, but as they talk about each topic, there's a little animation that happens that highlights that bar on the bar chart or pops it out forward and highlights the number as they speak about it. So someone's running the keynote. They're all keynote presentations, and someone's running the keynote at the back of the room for them, so they don't have to necessarily run their own. But they can if they want to. But it's fairly well organized, and that keeps your attention in the screen. Just putting up a static screen with all the stats on it while they talk for 15 minutes is really boring, and it brings life back to the presentation. And also they accentuate with, since they're in the media business, they have little clips and video clips that they go to every now and then. So that gets you out of the dry presentation. It gives the speaker a chance to rest their voice for a few moments while they look at a brief clip on the screen, and then they come back into their dry corporate presentation. But with builds, it makes it much more interesting.
Go ahead, John.
The general rules, I would say, is everything you add to a slide in particular adds to cognitive load, the ability of a person to perceive what's happening on the slide. So anytime I get to 5 objects on a slide, I start asking myself, what can I cut? If you can replace text with an image or a graphic, that's almost always the better choice. And if you can add subtle animation or emphasis to certain parts you want to highlight and do it in a way that's not distracting, that can be helpful.
Go ahead, Bill.
And I'd say the nuclear bomb of death by PowerPoint is reading to your audience the words on your presentation.
That's
like saying to them, I know you can't read, so let me do it for you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, going back to John's reference on cognitive load, you do have to be careful with the graphic, because I've been counseled a couple of times that sometimes the graphics themselves can cause a cognitive load if they are too complex.
Yeah.
So simplify, find your favorite animator and let them take the graphic and make it nice and simple. And maybe in your paper, back to my paper point, you have the really complex thing in there that gives you all the gory detail, but just the complex, simple stuff. And
really look at how all of those things are builds. Now, the rules that we usually tell people, if someone asks me like off the shelf, like what is the limit, usually what we'll tell them is 20 slides, 20 points, 20 words, like stay inside of those. If you've got more than that many words and the text gets smaller than that, then you've got a problem. I do put more into those things at times, but you break it carefully, and I definitely do more slides. The main thing is that it really depends on how fast you're going to move through those slides. A lot of times when I'm going through something, I'm buzzing slides. Like I'm not spending a minute or two on them. They're telling you one thing and they're going to do their own build. And almost every slide I build has a build. Any slide I make has a build in it, and it's oftentimes very complex builds. And sometimes they're timed, and sometimes they're not. But there's a lot you can do there in Keynote and PowerPoint that builds out, and slides, I think. Usually, when we use slides, we don't do the builds as much. But I think that you definitely can build those things out, and arrows can animate out, and things can pop in. And one of the things that I look at when I start to do those kinds of slides is different things mean different. I like, it's not like I use random. I definitely don't do any of the trickery, so I don't do like explode, shatter, all those things I don't use any of those. I use appear, kind of a zoom in and fade in. I might fade between slides. The magic slide transitions work really, really well as you kind of go through things, little things that, add some production value, but don't look silly, is usually how I approach most of those things. Move from the right, move from the left. Zoom in and fade in as it zooms, and it might pop a little bit because that's going to pull your eye to what I want you to look at and bring that out. But everything has a use. It's not just there to be cool or to be, it's like all the wipes that we get with our switchers and our editing tools. Everybody uses them at the beginning, and no one uses them after that. So you can tell people where you are in your development process by what you use. Go ahead, Bill.
I just want to say it's also getting a little bit harder because I know in my own work here at Office Hours, what I'm trying to do is optimize things, and I'm nowhere close to it. But one challenge to me, as Alex has said, and I agree with him, that a lot of people watch the show, but some people listen to it. So I would say my goal here is to get a couple of concepts into my audience's mind so that they can generate questions for the back half of the show based on these ideas that they might not have been used to when I began the presentation. But if they can't read them, and I have just said that the worst thing you can do is read them to them, I'm trying to strike a balance between the visual people who are consuming the show and the non-visual people who are consuming the show, and they are in direct conflict. I shouldn't read them my slides, but how does somebody who can't see the slides, who's listening in radio mode, get the content? I need to figure out a way to talk about the same concepts and generate that inner dialogue for the audience without one or two of those modes. It can be difficult, and that's why I know I'm using this as a big learning experience, trying to figure out how to get it right.
Next question.
From Danny Law in Malaysia, how would you design your presentations to look good on VR glasses for those who are attending remotely?
Go ahead, Peter.
Depending on the audience, but in general, I say I wouldn't. If for no other reason than if you have a mixed mode audience, I would try and shoot for the lowest common denominator, which is a 2D graphics. Now, I have done some stuff for a large military defense contractor where we did 3D, but everyone was wearing either goggles, AR goggles, VR goggles, or they had an interesting little device that could display a cube that could display a 3D graphic in the middle of a room so that people could be standing around the graphic as we were looking at it. But it was a very specific topic that allowed us to do that, and that mandated us doing that. But in general, I wouldn't do it just because, frankly, it's hard enough for the general person to design graphics on a flat screen. Teaching them how to do 3D graphics, the tools aren't there yet for the general junior engineer or junior guy developing stuff. I would steer them away from that kind of stuff.
You go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, unless you're an architect doing an architectural walkthrough or something, I see no need for virtual reality at all in presentations. It's just a distraction. It makes 20% of the people motion sickness, so make a presentation that looks good over looking at your feet as you puke. It's not going to be good. Anything that requires individual interactivity on behalf of the viewer is probably not a good thing. It's more of a distraction than anything else. So you want their attention to be in where you want it to be and not where they want it to be.
Go ahead, John.
I think those are good rules of thumb, and I think we should be thinking about the future. Where will presentations be? And some advantages VR would have is the ability to do like different aspect ratios within a slide deck. I think would be an interesting concept. Maybe you could have a slide that's really, really long in your field of view and one really, really large and IMAX-y. But the slide deck software, PowerPoint, already has 3D models that you can put into it, and I'm assuming Keynote will pretty soon. And so I think it's worth thinking about how will we use it in the future.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that'll be really interesting to see as we go into next year is a lot of us are just waiting for USDZ support inside of Keynote. We don't have it yet, but we keep on talking about it, and we think that it's obvious because it's available in many other apps already. One of the things that we do for currently is we literally open it in preview, rotate the object to what we want, and then save it out and drop it into Keynote, which is just silly. So it's just amazing that we haven't gotten that with Keynote yet, but I have a feeling they're just dealing with interface issues and trying to figure out exactly how it works inside of that. But I think that the ability we're going to get very quickly, I will almost guarantee that if and when Apple puts out some version of eyeglasses or goggles, what will come with it is all of their apps, Pages and Keynote, and probably even Numbers will support the ability to click on objects and have them pop up in front of you. And I think that's probably almost guaranteed that those two things will happen. So it'll be an interesting thing to happen. One thing that we do with other shows that we do in VR is split the data out. Remember that someone can look back and forth now. So I can keep you video on the front or on the side and allow you to look at me the whole time, or the person or the speaker, and then looking at other data, which allows you to kind of wander through the data as you go. Next question.
Glenn Mead in Waterloo, Ontario, with software such as Unreal Engine and Aximmetry and technologies such as augmented reality being used in online events, any ideas on how to use these in in-person and hybrid events?
Good. John?
I wouldn't call it augmented reality, but Tony Robbins and Eric Worre, who's actually his events have been a little bigger than Tony's. They're using Unreal Engine, so they're taking the Zoom feeds and they're feeding them into Unreal Engine, and then they're displaying them on those giant LED walls, and that's been very, very effective. I haven't seen any pure augmented reality in an online event yet. Have you, Alex?
No, not. Well, Facebook has done a couple of them, or Oculus has, but I haven't seen any major ones that have been done that way. You can look at that, just as a display. It may not be augmented reality, but it may just be using the 3D engine to display things, as John was talking about. My biggest problem with Unreal Engine currently is still that the Unreal Engine still has a lot of aliasing, and it probably doesn't bother anybody else, but it drives me crazy. So aliasing is the jagged edges, and I'm going to ruin your viewing of many graphics now, but there's these little jagged edges that are long lines, especially if they're at an angle, or circles. You're going to see little aliasing that goes along, and it's just because they're not being oversampled, because that takes a lot of processing power. But it is the anti-aliasing that's required to make that work. It doesn't really work in Unreal Engine. Until it does, I'm probably hesitant to use it for a lot of the stuff I'm doing, because it makes me crazy. I don't think it makes everybody else crazy, because they use it in football, NFL football and so on and so forth, but it does make me a little crazy. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, if you believe Mark Zuckerberg's, latest thing that everything should take place in the metaverse, in a 3D world, where presentations, everybody is, depicted as an avatar. And in the metaverse, I think it's just a distraction. It's a gimmick. It lowers your resolution of the stuff that you can present, and it's more of a novelty than anything else, and I don't think it's going to stick around for very long.
I think there's lots of things you could do, and we have seen. I think that Google's Expeditions was amazing, which was not so much you're going to go into the metaverse and stay there, but we're going to talk about something, and then you're going to throw cardboard up or whatever and pop it up and look at it, and then set it back down again. It didn't turn out for Google. I think a lot of it was a little too early, and Google has a history of being in before everybody else and then giving up before it becomes useful. I think that they have the vision, they just don't have the stick-to-itiveness. So I think that there are great solutions for that. There's great places that you could visualize those, but right now there's just not a large enough market to do it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asked, when presenting to neurodivergent groups, what specific factors do you need to keep in mind?
I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I'm going to take a shot at just say that there are neurodivergent groups out there who deserve to get the information as well as everybody else. I know that I struggle all the time trying to remember that everybody doesn't learn the same way I do. Everybody doesn't process things the same way I do. And just what I was saying before, I would look at a presentation based on how I understood presentations. And that was my starting point. And then you get to the point you think, well, what if somebody can't see the slides? What's their experience like? And just putting myself a moment into their shoes, I will say it is more difficult on issues like the spectrum because of exactly what it is, a spectrum. There are people who are highly functional and there are people who are not as functional in the traditional manner. And so just the fact that you are aware of those different needs, you can't always accommodate everybody perfectly. But if you're aware of it, you will at least find moments to try and help all of your audience get access to the content as is appropriate for them.
Good. Courtney, real quick.
I'd stay away from live presentations. Make them canned because in a video mode, people that are averse to loud noises can control the volume. They can also control the speed of playback. They can slow it down. And most video players these days, you can go up to 2x fast or 0.5 slow and slow it down to a rate where their level of comprehension works for them.
Good, Peter.
I was going to say the same thing. I'm reminded of something I experienced, and I should know better because I'm partially red-green colorblind myself. But I built a presentation, this was many years ago, and took it through 4 lines of review for 4 different levels of management, each getting progressively more difficult. And then finally got to the lab director. And we were all standing around because he was completely oblivious to what I was trying to tell him. And it turned out I was using red and green bar charts, and he was even worse red-green colorblind than I was. He could not understand the material.
Yeah, I will say that and I don't know about how this affects neurodivergent, but I can say that my slides tend to be very monochromatic, except for the things that are important. So I make everything gray. And then when I want something to pop, I give it a color. Like, I want you to pay attention to this. I want you to, so I'm very controlling about what you think about, because I'm giving you black and gray and white. And then suddenly something has color, and now that means something, that's more important than everything else. But I definitely don't add color as a knee-jerk reaction. I'm very careful about why I add color to anything. And that makes, when everything's important, when you make everything bright colors, when everything's important, nothing is. And so you take the stuff that is, you're moving things along with, and you're describing things, but then when something's important, it's color image. That's why I like I'm now moving to dark backgrounds, because the images look better. The photographs, all those graphs, everything sticks out because I'm deciding what is important in that presentation for you to really walk away with. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, the color is interesting because I can think as far back in the days of when freelance started to go around, and then later PowerPoint, the corporate communications guys would say, this is the template you will use. This is the color palette you will use for exactly the reason you just said, right? Keep it simple. If you really want to bring something to pop out, you could change the contrast of the object, not necessarily change the color.
Yeah, and things that I tend to stay away from are saturated colors, almost always. So I'll stay away from saturated colors. They compete with photographs. I also stay away from any kind of thing that would be considered neon, like neon colors. And I also almost never use yellow and orange. They're weak colors. so they tend to be not colors that we tend to use unless they are part of a brand. Next question.
Next question comes from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What is the procedure/standard for submitting presentations or videos to show and office hours?
I just need to see them a week ahead of time. And I may not respond a week ahead of time. It's unfortunate because it just depends on my schedule, but I need us to send up to them. The reason is that one thing that I've noticed pretty quickly is we as well, a couple things. One is the panel and what appears to be the viewers goes away almost immediately. So when you put up slides, just know that no one's listening to you. It's like almost nobody's listening. They're waiting for you to stop. We're a conversational group, and they're waiting to start the conversation. And so what I found is that I'm trying to kind of tamp down people's interest in doing slides, because you just watch everybody just go, woo, they're all off and just waiting for the presentation to end. And I've noticed this for the last 2 years. And so I just don't think it's, in general, I don't think it's worth it. Also, I would highly recommend, or I probably not only recommend, but really I don't want people to put videos up about information. The chances of us being able to, on a weekly basis, produce content that's as good as someone's going to see on YouTube is very low. And so the thing is that it's better to show those examples and talk over them than to, okay, now we're going to watch a movie about the thing that I could have just talked about. So I think that we want to make sure that we're just talking about them and having a conversation about those. When we create a video about it, it means no one can ask questions in the middle of it. And that's what we want to do, is we want to be constantly pushing for discussion. Well, at least I believe we should be constantly pushing for discussion, because that's where we see active listening. That's where we see people engage. That's where people remember. That's where we're customizing the event for the listeners, not just for what we thought they might like. So the chances of me approving a slide or videos will be, as we move forward, become almost impossible. Like, it really better be like Apple level slides, and there better be no more than 5, for a presentation, because there's like 5 slides. If you have a video you want to show, it's got to be an example we can talk over. Like, if you look at the videos that I show, they're because we're drawing over top of them. We're talking about lower thirds. We're talking about graphics. We're not, or there's a short example that we're now going to talk about. I'm not giving you information. I'm giving you an example for discussion. And so you just want to make sure that I'm just trying to tamp that down, because I just don't think it works. And so again, I would say that the slides have to be super graphic. They have to be ready to be talked over. They shouldn't be planned to be shown one after the other. We should show one, then talk, then show one, then talk. And we really, should dig through that, and they should be used as a last resort to show something, not as an automatic. And so I just think that we really need to be careful, because more than other organizations, we are a very conversation-driven group, and I just don't think that we take well to anything that's prolonged. And so when I talk to people as a guest, I tell them 3 or 4 slides max. Don't talk about things like marketing. Just if you need to show us a document of how something works, put it up. But I really push people away from any kind of presentation when they're coming in as a third party. And I think that we just need to make sure that we think about that really hard, and really, and the earlier you can send them to me, the better. Just because, like, this week is really hard because I'm in production, so I just don't have much time. So I think that it's important to show them ahead of time. But in general, my attempt to have people show them to me ahead of time before they use them in the show is my attempt to make it hard and difficult, and people have to really want them to put them into their presentations. For this specific group, I'm creating a big hump. big bump, nearly a cliff that is covered with ice to get over if you want to show slides or videos. Next question.
Lenny Nelson in San Antonio. I work with many executives who think they make great presentations. How do I subtly advise them they need some assistance?
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, it depends what you mean by make. Are they good presenters, or are they wasting the corporation's time as executives by sitting behind their desk and making the presentation up? One of the things we learned a long time ago when I was with the IBM company is our executives are paid to represent the company, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily paid to create all the material. So we took the, people, and I was one of them for a while, as a lead engineer. I would be asked to go and talk about something, but I'd have somebody come interview me from corporate communications and we'd just talk about the material. They'd go off and do their magic. And I truly mean it was magic, because they could come back with simplified stuff that I could show graphically and to make my point. I mean, that was key to this conversation. The other one is, and I know a number of us have probably been through this, but we used to call it Charm School at IBM,
right,
on how to present to clients, how to present to the press, different
right,
rules, engage, things like that. Recently I went through with somebody and showed them a bunch of YouTubes of people who really did present well, and then said, by the way, somebody else wrote their slides.
right. Yep.
Right.
Good. Yep. Good, John.
Yeah, for me, if it's someone in my organization who's higher in the chain of command, I don't advise them. I try to lead by example. And if they're in a meeting where I'm showing a good slide deck and I have quality video, oftentimes they'll ask me or they'll comment, wow, that's really good. How did you do that? If it's somebody who's external to me, I'll ask, can I give you a suggestion?
Yeah. And I don't suggest anybody, I don't recommend anything for people's slides generally, especially clients or C-level. If they have an opinion, I let them have that opinion. But just like John, I try to do good slide decks when I'm asked to do them. And the goal is to do them well enough that they look different enough from what everybody else is doing that that people come and ask, like, how did you do that? Or now a lot of larger companies do have presentation teams that do exactly what was described earlier. They build the presentations for the executives, and that works out a lot better but for companies that don't do that. And I have to admit that if you're someone really good at doing decks, and a lot of folks in your company aren't, I'm happy to help anybody related to what I'm doing to get better, but also my ideas get done faster because I have better decks, so I don't worry about it too much. People suddenly, at some point they notice that more of my suggestions are going into the pipeline than others. And then they want to figure out why. And that's usually, it comes down to a deck, and I will say that I'm not as good as the presentation teams. Like, I hand stuff to presentation teams all the time. And when they come back with what they came up with, it's so much better than what I came up with. And I've been doing this for a long time. They're very valuable assets within a company. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, with mobile device integration and desktop applications like Keynote, do you still see a market for dedicated clicker devices on stage?
Go ahead, John.
Yes, don't trust that you're going to click the right spot on a screen without seeing where you're clicking. And a physical button makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, it's easier. Even for people at home, we've used clickers, or pickles that we tend to call it. And usually the one that we use the most is the DSAN Perfect Q. But there's a lot of other little ones that will work. That one just works all the time. And we send them literally to our speakers remotely, and then give them back, find a way to transport that USB back to make that work, because we're, it's just, especially for people who are comfortable with it, it's there. Definitely, as you get good at not doing that, you don't need them as much. But I think that there's still going to be a transition of a decade before you take everybody that was used to being on stage and moving them to something online. So I think that there's still time. Good, Peter.
I still use, and I've give out have people use a dedicated clicker just to talk to my Mac, just
right.
showing. This isn't built by Logi. But it's got a forward and a back button, just for that reason, so that they aren't messing with the keyboard, they aren't messing with the trackpad. It's very obvious what they're doing, so they don't get caught up in the process. Yep. Both online, I've used it here, or not on office hours, but I've used it online, and I use it at on stage, so to speak.
Right. Go ahead, Bill.
Right.
Yeah, part of the presenter's job is to assess the audience all the time and try to figure out whether they're engaged or not. And so the pacing of how you move across things, that's the difference between a video presentation and a keynote presentation, is you can control the pace of information delivery to people. So taking that away from somebody, you should always have a backup, but taking it away from the presenter means that they're not as engaged in that aspect of their presentation.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, never use a touch screen for interactivity because it takes your attention away from the screen and away from the audience. So you want to use a physical button clicker.
I will say that there's one, if that screen has, so I've had ones where I put an iPad or a Wacom tablet that has all the things, all the inputs that I might have, and I make that a touch screen. It's super nice because I can look down and go, if I'm not having to process it, if I look down and see an image and just tap on it, like, okay, I want to show you this. As a speaker, I find that to be useful. But for our producers, we're not going to get to all the questions, so voting becomes really important. In fact, overall, more and more, it's important to vote on the questions so that we know which ones you want us to prioritize. Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What should those hosting a Q&A focused show like Office Hours bear in mind to keep the audience and panelists engaged?
Again, think of 5 slides max. You're going to spend 30 seconds on that slide max, and that your entire presentation should not be outside of 15 minutes. And you should really look at more like 10 minutes. And what you really want to do is look at your slide as we're going to have a slide, then we're going to discuss it, and then we'll jump to another slide. But try never to put 2 slides next to each other unless they're going to be images that you're talking about. So if they're actual images of things and you're going to interact with them somehow and talk to them, you might want to leave them up a little longer. And you can go theoretically back to back. But if they are a slide deck slide with a diagram, there should be almost never a time when 2 of them go next to each other. Next question.
It looks like David Brady is offering a suggestion. Best practice, have an overview printout with slide numbers. Helpful when you have to busk a preso, allowing easy reference for slide number plus enter. Also can be used to confirm fonts if delivered for playout.
Yes. Yeah, and again, this is where what color of the slide becomes important, because if you print out the dark slides, they look better when you're presenting them nowadays. But they do create, like you can empty an entire ink cartridge with one slide deck. So just kind of keep that in mind. Next question.
Next question from Craig McFarlane, Boston, Massachusetts. How do you serve the leave behind needs for depth and complexity? Example, put complex slides in the deck, but in the back and not present.
Go ahead, Peter.
We touched upon this earlier. You and I do the same thing. I write a paper. The paper is the detailed leave behind, or maybe the upfront conversation. Right. Sometimes I will send the paper ahead of time, and then I'll come and do the presentation. I would come and do the presentation. And it's merely meant to drive the conversation and to give them the detail in the end. They want to go back because that contains all the detail, including things like footnotes and references and all the gory gop.
Right.
That I don't know if you deal with, Alex, but I know in my prior job, there was not a paper I didn't generate that didn't have probably half a dozen external references tied to it.
I usually put the external references right into the slide. And so if I'm going to show you something from something, I just put by, this comes from here. That way I don't have to think about it.
I mean the formal citation.
Yeah, I know. I don't do that. I don't have to. Go ahead, Bill.
When I had to do this, I used to do a set of private notes for me when I was presenting, but also a set of public notes. I'd redo the slideshow, and anything that additional I was going to say that I thought was mission critical would go in the notes for the public, and then I'd just give them a URL to where it was.
And I have to admit that on some of them, I do still build decks that have all the text in them instead of doing and this sounds crazy, but instead of doing a pages document. And the reason for that is that some people won't read them. If you give them a document, they won't read it. If you give them a dense slide deck, they will. So you have to kind of look at the culture of the system of the company you're in. You can say many of the same things inside of a complex slide deck that you would inside of a standard, prose layout. But they won't read it if you do it that way. They'll only read it if you give it to them as a slide deck. These are like in the Fortune 10, it's like 2/3 is all decks. And they expect dense decks. And if they don't get that deck, they're not going to pay attention to it. Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. Where can I learn practical suggestions on slide deck techniques?
Go ahead, John.
I was hoping some other panelists would give theirs as well, but 3 that I like are brightcarbon.com, Taylor Kroonquist's YouTube channel. Training Mag Network has some great training-specific webinars. Or you can stay tuned to Office Hours, especially Education Hours. On 1029, we're going to be talking about doing animations in PowerPoint, and 11.5 we'll be doing a ruthless redo of slide decks. So if anyone has some bad slide decks you want us to take a look at, send them my way.
Good, Peter, real quick.
I spent a lot of time with my corporate communications folks that could help me build really good slide decks and listen to because they're really good at how everything pulls together.
Good. Bill?
The seminal thing I read early in my career was Edward Tufte's The Visual Display of Quantitative Information. It sounds like a big title, but it's one of the smartest things I ever read.
I got excited. He had an online version. Because I never got to go to his stuff. I have all his books. But I didn't find his presentation to be very easy to watch. So of all the things, like his display of information was great. His actual presentation of it was not nearly what I thought it would be.
He was a writer, not a presenter, I guess. That's too bad.
Exactly. Next question.
Josh Kaufman, still in Pittsburgh. How can a presenter avoid adding too much text into a visual?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Well, the technique I was taught a long time ago was to take a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, fold it in half one way, then fold it in half the other way. If you can then write it cleanly inside one of those 4 quadrants, that's the size of a slide that you could read from the back of a 25-foot room.
Yeah, a lot of times I convert almost everything that I do down to 640 by 360, and if I can't read the text or I can't understand what I'm looking at, then it's probably too small.
It's the same technique. It's the same technique.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Go ahead, Bill. Real quick.
Out of advertising, there's also the billboard rule. Somebody's driving by 60 miles an hour, you got 7 words. That's all you got.
Yeah. So try to keep it straightforward. It's just really working at. It takes a lot more processing power to encode this so that it's decoded easily. So when you don't spend a lot of time on the encode, it takes a lot more pressure. Puts a lot more pressure on the decode. Next question.
Stefan Fischer, Wurzburg, Germany. What do you think about the Prezi style of presentation of zooming in and out?
Go ahead, John.
When done well, it's exceptional. It's really hard to do well, and most people would be better off spending their time using a tool that everyone uses, like a slide deck.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Has anyone ever worked with Keynote on the iPhone or iPad? How well does it translate from desktop to mobile?
So the funny thing is that my way of doing this is actually an integration between both desktop and so what I do is I go into Notes and I type out the outline that I want. Now you can do the outline in Keynote, but I find it easier to do Notes because it's just everywhere that I want to be, and I can open it up, and while I'm thinking about it, I can jump on my phone or my iPad or whatever and just keep working on it. Then I take that and I open up Keynote in my iPad, and I now just draw. And the reason I do that is because you can get caught up in fonts, pictures, searching, and you lose your thread. So I'm the thread of the reason that I want to talk about this is in Notes. How I want to display it is done as quickly as I can or as fluidly as I can, where I keep the thread of my story together in Keynote, but I do it on frame by frame on Keynote. Then I go back to the desktop and I format everything on the desktop because formatting on the iPad is pretty painful. So then I format and find all my images and put them all in on my desktop. But then I usually present from my iPad. So I go back and forth between the two pretty often. Go ahead, Peter.
I added one step in between. I tend to follow the exact same process you do, but I add one step in between, which is I basically record myself on Zoom giving the presentation,
right,
with the rough cut, with your hand-drawn versions,
right,
and continuing to talk through it, and then I can go back and make them more formalized.
I don't record it. I do speak it out loud while I'm going through the drawings, and then I go, oh, I need one more thing over here. So I do it. I don't do it as a record.
My memory is bad enough as it is. I need the recording.
Well, what I do is I tend to go through it and stop and draw something else. So I'm going to need this thing, or I'm going to need that, or whatever is interesting. Next question.
Stefan Fischer, Wurzburg, Germany. Do you recommend marking your presentation with a copyright sign when you give certain content away?
Go ahead, Courtney.
If you have lawyers on retainer, sure. Just put a disclaimer on the cover sheet or the opening slide down at the bottom, very small. It says copyright, current date by so-and-so, all rights reserved. And that should protect you if you have a problem with it leaking out, if it's proprietary information. You can have your lawyers enforce it then because you can say it was marked.
And go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, in the world I came from, thou shalt copyright, but there were some other classifications you had to think about, which were proprietary, but also client proprietary. Because sometimes you're doing things for the client, and for your own purposes, you need to acknowledge the fact. My favorite one was when I was working for IBM, but doing work for the Walt Disney Company. One of the things they were infamous for beating us up about is we couldn't use any of the Mickey Mouse kind of characters in our no
All right.
pun intended, in our presentations.
Right. Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
No. Yeah. Exactly. Courtney.
And there are ways, of course, when I receive scripts all the time that are watermarked, that they put the recipient's name in big letters diagonally across it so that if they reproduce it in any way that they're not supposed to, they know who it came from.
Yep. Last question.
John Foltz, Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, giving us a suggestion. Duarte Design is a great resource for examples. Recently, they've leaned into training content on their website.
Definitely check out Duarte. They do a lot of the presentations, or they do almost all the presentation design for WWDC. And so, when you want to see something clean, I spoke at WW in 2007. I think I've told the story where I built the best presentation I've ever built because I had to meet with somebody every week for 6 weeks to get it done. And then I gave it to them and they made it much better. So they're really incredible resources. Go ahead, Bill.
+1, if you ever get a chance to work with them, do so. They're great folks.
Absolutely. All right. It's a good conversation. Let us talk through presentations. It's good. Thank you to our producers for all the great questions that kind of drove that conversation. I wasn't sure whether there'd be a lot of conversation, but there was. It's great panel. So thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. It was great folks that brought a lot of great experience to the second hour and the first hour. And thank you for the incredible crew on the back end that's making all of this happen. So it's a team that gets together every single day, and different people most days, and they figured out how to pull this all together. So anyway, really well done. All right, we're now, and I believe we have David Paskin. Do we have David Paskin right after this? I think David Paskin's talking about eCam right after this. So stay tuned for that in after hours. So stay tuned for that eCam with David Paskin in after hours, starting in about a minute or two. All right, see you there. After all that presentation talk, I'm speechless. I got to find out how to sell some things so I can go get another iPad. I don't know why I need the new iPad, but
Well, LG just introduced a rolling phone.
a rolling phone.
Yeah, it rolls out long